Jeff is a very deep human being. He's a poet. He's an artist. He's a creator. And I'm very grateful to have you here, Jeff. So thank you.
Paul, it's a deep dive of an honor to be here with you. And I have to tell you that when I first came into coherence of you with Kyle, and Kyle kept referencing you and Dr. Quiet and all the different things within. And as I became familiar with your teachings and the blessings and the lessons with which you're gifting, what I really receive is that you're playing in both the meta and the physical. And it's a very powerful thing to be met there. And what you're doing in terms of voraciously bringing together all the great teachings and wisdoms and lessons. You said it earlier when we were having a workout this morning, you said, you're bringing together the essential. And I agree with that. But what I see is that what you're bringing in together is the essential into the elemental.
Yes.
And it's grounding. And my favorite word in the history of words is not an English word. And the word is situ. Are you familiar with that word?
I have heard it. You mean in situ?
Situ, S-E-T-U.
No, tell me about it.
Situ is a Sanskrit word that means in the way I receive it, it means the benevolent bridge. And it's not a bridge in the linear. It's a bridge that I look at like a mycelium network of pulling all the elements together.
Beautiful.
And so it's an honor to meet you today, a true spirit animal brother on the C2. And
Great.
So thank you. And truly, this is a buckle up, and I'm honored to be met. And with what, as you mentioned, this is not just about clothes. There was codes in what was created here, and so to be met in both the physical and also the meta is something that's deeply powerful. So I just want to just share with you that the gratitude and graciousness with which I sit here with you. So thank you.
Well, it's my pleasure. It really is. And I was excited that you live close enough to come down and be here. And, I wanted to share our rainbow home with you and just kind of how we engage life. And it was fun to take you around the property and show you our gardens and our greenhouse that's under construction and just get a feel for the land and, enjoy the sauna and the cold plunge and Sasha's great food and just the vibe, and it's like we're really doing our best to create a space for our children to learn how to live so they can carry that out into the world and, be grounded in reality instead of digital delusions,
Yeah, being earth connected.
Yeah, exactly.
Truly in everything that we do and see and be and let go of what we used to believe.
I always tell people any philosophy worth living is worth challenging. If you're not challenging it, then you're a believer, not an intuitor or a deep thinker or an open-minded human being,
Yes.
Jeff, I'd love it if you could share a biographical sketch of your life, your work, and what ultimately inspired you to create One Golden Thread. And I ask that because, in our work together, we've met to talk to each other, get to know each other by video conference. We've had time to hang out together. And what I really loved when I spent time with you is realizing that you're way more than just a guy that makes cool clothing, and today we're going to give you a chance to share some of your poetry because your poetry is incredibly powerful. And, you design these clothes and you have, a very artistic aspect to your soul. And you and I share that both of our mothers are great artists. My mother's a very accomplished sculptor and your mother was a very accomplished artist. So we kind of have that gene in us, and it's fun for me to be with someone that relates to the world artistically because one of my personal beliefs that God is an artist. The difference is God's the artist that can make the most beautiful painting and burn it and feel no remorse and know that God can just do it all again. And so when I meet somebody that's got that beautiful capacity for creativity and detachment, it's a real rare experience. So I think it would be lovely if you could share with people kind of how you grew into this man that you are and what ultimately led to the creation of One Golden Thread.
Yeah, I was born by two incredible parents, a naturalist father and a mother who saw life through a color palette of an artist's lens. And that was foundational for me. My father took us on the banks of I was conceived on the bank of a river.
Cool.
When I walked into Burning Man 40 years later, one of the matriarchs of Burning Man took one look at me, and after 10 minutes, she says, "Your name is River." So
Cool.
this has been in my DNA, and my mother's art was all about nature and us as one. Now, I pushed this all away for half a century. So we'll get to that, in a moment. So, but I was born as into a constitution that was very empathetic
That's beautiful.
to everyone's journey, but my own.
Oh, well, I'm sure there was a force of nature working there that would crack the cosmic egg, and it did.
If there's one thing that would be a blessing this podcast would be somebody to see themselves. Well, I don't have to wait 50 years,
Right,
to allow myself to be empathetic to my journey and to realize that the gold that resides inside us is the thread that unites us.
Yes.
Which is, we'll get there. I was, very empathetic to everyone's journey but my own, and it developed a deep muscle memory of listening to understand versus respond.
Yes.
Now, I was a very weird kid in this way, and weird, by the way, which is a very powerful word to unpack.
It's a very shamanic word.
Exactly. Weird, that we thought was one that was disassociative and unable to fit in and what have you. I mean, there's a guy that, we're encased in books. I don't know if you have this book here. It was written by a guy named Webster.
What's the name of the book?
The dictionary.
Oh, I have plenty of Webster's dictionaries, yes. I've got a whole shelf of dictionaries. I probably got 20 of them.
Have you ever looked up the word weird?
I have looked it up, actually, but
can we unpack it right now?
Fred Allen Wolf. You know who Fred Allen Wolf is?
I do not.
Fred Allen Wolf is a genius. He's not only a shaman, but he's a quantum physicist, and he was featured in the movie What the Bleep, and he's written some of the most powerful books there is in the world on spirituality and quantum physics. But he goes into what weird means, because he says, I was weird. So he has a whole section in one of his books that really is all about weird. So I'm pretty hip to weird. Well, and I'm weird, so it's okay.
You are weird AF, and if your listeners are gonna take the first thing away from this podcast, it's the recapitulation and the definition of coming back in a coherence of the power and the beauty and the grace and the openness of weird, which is acting supernatural.
Mm-hmm.
And one who's following their destiny.
Yeah.
So I was doing that, but I was doing that as a deflection, not as a reflection. I was being a listener. I saw the gold that resides inside. I was sitting with my parents, friends at age 8 and asking not just questions of them, but I would ask them follow-up questions. And I remember one time, as the story went, I think my father came to me or my mother and said, "What did you say to Herschel?" He came and he was all teary-eyed and said that he saw something in himself he forgot about, and it came from something you said to him. So this was the way that I was living in the muscle memory that I was being. I saw the gold that resided inside people, and yet I didn't see that in myself. So the way that it manifested as I grew into adulthood was that I became a deep listener. I became, language was, my mother was the punniest person that I know. So language and putting words and taking words apart and putting them back together and was something that was powerful. And yet I never saw myself as creative. I never saw myself as being an expressor. I saw myself as being a reflector.
Yeah.
So what transpired is I developed a dis-ease inside myself that manifested itself very specifically. Twice a year, I would get golf ball size enlargements in my throat on both sides. And it would drop into my lungs, and I develop a flu-like symptoms twice a year. Just habitually, I just assumed this is what everybody went through.
Mm-hmm.
And into my late 30s, and early 40s, I had walking pneumonia 3 times in 7 years.
Wow.
And I ended up going to see a Chinese medicine doctor because Western medicine wasn't doing the trick for me.
They would just want to cut it out.
Yeah, well, and the Eastern medicine, I mean, this was a very different place in my life. I was expecting, me to say, what do I take, the red pill or the blue pill, and give it to me so I can just move on with my life? And he looked at me, and after he took my pulse, and for those that are listening, I'm showing you the way he took my pulse, which I'd never experienced before. He was like dancing around my wrist. I couldn't find my pulse, and he finally did what he needed to do, and he sat back in his chair and he said, "Are you open to receiving? Can I give it to you straight?" And this, I felt like, is the first time in my life I was going to allow myself to confront myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I sat there grounded, like, okay, let go of your ego, fucker, Jeff, and you better really listen. And this is your moment. First moment. It was a crucible moment. And he looked at me and he said, "You're a shallow breather. Your lungs are scarred. Your kidneys are on fire." And he said, "While you may look good on the outside, I can tell you right now that you're not long for the planet.
Mm.
And whatever it is you need to re-examine in terms of relationships in your life, it's time for you to start if you so choose. And that relationship begins with yourself."
Yeah.
And that started me on an open journey. Sometimes we need to be, we actually need to be shocked into
waking up to ourselves.
Wake up to ourselves. And so that was the opening of a journey. And I had on my desk for probably 6 months, it was gathering dust, a pamphlet from Esalen. And I finally creased it. And I was looking through the pages with my partner at the time, and she's looking at it too. And we decided we're going to go to Esalen, each take our own workshop.
Great.
And I'm thumbing through the pages, and every page felt like it was awaken your inner Dharma unicorn mumbo jumbo woo woo bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
And I stopped even reading the names of the workshops.
Mm-hmm.
And just read the first page, the first sentence. Like, I figure if the first sentence is going to give you some indication. And I turn the page and think of a moment, Paul, and your listeners, that you feel like you were just punched in the chest.
Mm-hmm.
Think of that moment that you actually receive something, and it's like that centrifugal force from the crown to the root, and it meets in the middle,
Mm-hmm.
and drops your heart. And that's what happened when I read those first 2 sentences, and then I read the headline of what the workshop was called, and a tear fell.
What was the workshop?
Well, first of all, the first sentence said, "Do you ever feel that other people's opinions hold sway over your own to such an extent that you don't know what your truth is?"
Wow.
And the workshop was claiming your voice.
That's
and
beautiful.
Remember, it all started
with your voice.
with my voice,
throat.
with my throat. And so what came out of that was really a rushing river of openness. And all of a sudden, what I was developed a lifelong muscle memory was of listening to understand versus respond. I began to understand myself and come into coherence with myself. And it developed a new muscle memory of the rushing river that led me to plant medicine that opened me up there. And in 2014 became another crucible moment where it was my it was a buffer day of a second plant ceremony. And the night before, for the first time in my life, I had seen Source, and I saw the Source in a way that I'd never understood it before. I shared the story with you last night. It was that moment where I said, I need to get out of this basement. I need to go outside in this beautiful valley in Vermont. And I walked outside and I looked up and I saw something that I'd never understood before. And I saw the stars truly smiling.
Yes.
I saw the trees dancing. And I looked to my left at the person that was watching me. And I saw this purple, whitish, bluish light emanating from his chest. And I looked down at myself and I saw the same. And in that moment, it just became clear, like this notion that the universal aspect of it all,
yeah,
that that godlike energy that resides inside. And God is source. It's not about religion. It's about simple this coherence of connection, and that we begin to realize we do everything we do for connection and love.
Yes, we do.
And the next day, I looked at my open pages of a journal, and what flowed out of that was something that I'd never even thought of was imaginable, which was I was unpacking all the lies in disguise, all the reframes around everything from fear and ego and pain and love into this coherence of new gateways of understanding. And it was that I buried for 2 years as something that was a self mantra, but I'd shared it with nobody, that I came to realize was a story not about me, but is a story about we. And that the gold that resides inside us is the thread that unites us. And that became the expression that if I can share my golden voice, I can inspire another and another and another to share theirs.
Well, it's interesting too because you were a professional storyteller, if I remember right.
I was an amplifier prior to One Golden Thread for everybody else's visions and vibrations. So yes, I was a storyteller as a business, as a revenue monkey, or as a business head for other things that were putting good things in the world, but it never was a divinely guided,
Wasn't your own
it
voice,
was
is what you're
it
saying.
wasn't my own voice. I was simply, again, I was living into the old pattern of Jeff,
Mm-hmm.
and what I realized, is that when you're simply amplifying for others, I was a master of likes before likes were a thing with, Instagram and Facebook and
Right.
whatever. But that's the way I was courted. And therefore I created myself as a chameleon.
Mm.
And so it's very important, for all those listeners that are saying, yes, fuck yes, thinking back to the moment that you stepped into your own expression. And because what that does is it gives us permission, to pivot into that thing that gives us purpose and perspective and patience and love.
Mm-hmm.
It took me obliterating the lie that if we are sharing, that we are somehow being selfish, narcissistic, or egoic.
Mm.
And the reality is it's just the opposite. By sharing your voice, you are simply allowing people to see, the source energy within you, and you're inspiring others to do the same.